Good morning and welcome to On the Bench. I am your host for this episode, Brendan Sonnone. I am joined by Zach Blaustein. Chris is not with us today. Uh, he's not able to join us today because
Jeez.
he's on the bench with a new slate of official visitors arriving. Want to get photos of them and try to gather intel and pick up on vibes and all that good stuff. So it's going to be Zach and myself. I was on the bench this weekend helping out I think they had 16 official visitors. And we got some crystal balls from that. Zach dropped a couple of hefty CBs from ZB. So we have that to get to. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty recruiting centric episode, a little bit of team stuff as well. And let's get into it. But first, a shout out to our sponsors. Chattanooga Whiskey. I still got this beautiful bottle. I haven't gotten into it since I've had one or two pours, but it's a very nice bottle of Bottle and Bond Chattanooga Whiskey from Spring 2021 line, which I mean just came out, but it means it's been simmering for 4 years, aged to perfection, and you get all those beautiful caramely burnt brown sugar notes. Pick up a little cherry there. It's toasted. It's delicious. Zach, actually, when you come up for this final weekend of official visits, maybe we could have a pour and you can do your own review on it. But it's one of the many things that Chattanooga Whiskey does remarkably well. Their bottle and bond is probably one of the best things they do semi-annually. That and their founders edition are two really awesome offerings. But you can find them all over the place. If you're looking for that bottle specifically, shoot me a DM, PM, whatever M, and I will help guide you to a place in your region that might be carrying it. And then we want to give a shout out to our buyers known sponsor. Who would that be, Zachary?
The Turner Group. I was about to say Chattanooga Whiskey. Had me so sold.
That's what a salesman does. Yeah, darn it. Damn it. The Turner. I'm sorry, Colin. The Turner Group. I blame that all on Zach. I have not had any Chattanooga whiskey. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, if you're looking to buy or sell in the state of Florida, the Turner Group, Colin, Amy Turner, going to be able to help you literally get where you want to go. They do an awesome job and really good people, well connected, well sourced, if you will, in our industry. Yeah, they do an awesome job. So if you're looking for a place to literally go, well, that's who we'd send you to. So Zachary, let's get going here. Where do you want to start off? A little bit of football stuff, team stuff, or do you want to just jump into the recruiting?
Buyer Sonone gnawing on a stogie.
I do love to gnaw on a cigar. No, I'm not going to put that out there. No, I don't love doing that because I don't want this to get back to an insurance company or anything. I just realized I've been doing it for the last few weeks, thinking it's a totally clean vice. That it was just kind of as long as you brush your teeth and good dental health, there it was fine. But apparently, there's like nicotine addiction and oral cancer stuff, so I got to stop it then. So just another thing in my life that I can't have. So no, I guess.
Whoops.
Why are you enjoying this so much?
No, I raised the alarm right before we started about that, and I didn't realize you were going to take it that seriously. But yeah, let's start with the team news that you broke this week. We never break any news, unfortunately, but the one time we got lucky. Brendan broke a pretty big hire to Mike Norvell's coaching staff.
Yeah, as far as June personnel moves are concerned, it was one of the bigger ones that you're probably seeing college football this offseason. And that is the addition of Zack Arnett, former Mississippi State head coach and previously defensive coordinator, to the coaching staff as basically an analyst. I don't think FSU's officially announced it, so not an official role or title yet, but he's going to be an analyst, and this is someone who comes with a few things in addition to the SEC experience, which being able to have a familiarity with how to recruit at that level and coordinate against really the best trench players in the country on average. I think that's important, but maybe more so, Zach, is that he's extremely familiar with Tony White. He played for Tony White at New Mexico and then got his coaching debut with him at San Diego State, and they worked together for, see if I can pull up. Zack Arnett was at San Diego State from 2011 to 2019, and I think Tony White was at San Diego State, I think, through 2018. So, I mean, they worked together for quite a long time, run a similar defense, and that's the real value, I think, is Tony White bringing in someone who's coached at a high level and coached with him and understands his scheme pretty intimately.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very, very familiar with each other. It's pretty cool that, he was Zach Arnett was a linebacker in Tony White's linebacker room at New Mexico State, I
Mhm.
think. So deep ties there, really good understanding of Tony White's scheme. Another veteran coach in the room to kind of help. And I think there's probably some value to him on the recruiting trail as well. I mean, he's been in the SEC, not at one of these big time SEC programs, but he was the head coach um, at Mississippi State after the passing of Mike Leach, and that was short lived. But he's a well respected defensive coordinator and someone that has coached really high level defenses throughout his tenure or his career. So yeah, I'm interested to see what kind of impacts. It's hard to measure that, but what kind of impact he can have on FSU's 2025 season. It feels like one of these 1 year, 1 season rental types where he kind of because he was at UNLV and then departed due to personal reasons back in April. So
Mhm.
he had a DC job at UNLV, but is now on Florida State staff for what we think at least this season. But yeah, it's an intriguing hire. I know some people on our board were pushing for him to be the DC hire when that role opened at Florida State earlier this offseason. But you get him and in a lesser role, and then you get obviously Tony White from Nebraska. So um, I mean, you have to think it's probably a pretty good development for FSU to have a guy like him in that room.
Two like more I think understated uh, potential so first off, caveat, like I don't know how much of an impact an analyst has. We're in mid-June here. We're going to analyze an analyst hire more than we probably would otherwise. But the name and the background, and the ties to Tony White, I think are important here. And he was at Zack Arnett was at Mississippi State from 2020 through 2023. So it's a decent amount of time to kind of understand the lay of the land there, and was also an analyst at Ole Miss this past season as well. They had a pretty good defense. So someone who's been in the Southeast coaching and around and recruiting, at a level that I think is important to kind of have on staff. FSU values Mississippi, I think, at a pretty high rate, more than you'd expect. A Florida school too. It's just something that they had done with the previous staff at Memphis and that connection. So there's always a lot of carryover with Mississippi. And I mean, they've lost some people on staff that had Mississippi ties, I think. Gabe Fertitta comes to mind. He's now coaching down in Louisiana, but he had high school coaching experience in Mississippi. And so, anyways, they tried to beef up and ramp that up a little bit this offseason to kind of make up for that. And this probably helps out a little bit there with connections and whatnot. Yeah, I don't know exactly, Zach, how big a deal that is. But the bigger thing, I think, is like, let's say things go really well under Tony White. And like the timeline is, either goes really well under Tony White and he's here for a couple seasons before he becomes a head coach, or things don't go particularly well. And I think things in general, if your DC hire doesn't work out here, then the leash for Mike Norvell, we can connect the dots there. But if this is some kind of dynamic that an heir apparent or predecessor, or successor kind of deal, it's someone that could be an option for you if Tony White goes ahead and elevates himself to a higher level as a head coach. Although I would imagine Zack Arnett would be a DC candidate for Tony White, given how close those two are as well. But that would be someone to keep in mind as well if things work out well for you as a defense, where you can keep some continuity if you like what you've done schematically and stuff the last few years. So just some big picture things I think to think about with what someone of this caliber of an analyst hire can actually be for you. Cool. Let's move to recruiting. I'll start throwing some softballs your way, and you can knock them out of the park. Oh, that was an awful swing, but I'm also on kind of a tight one. Please don't clip that. Anyone? 3, 2, 1. All right, let's talk about recruiting, Zach. They had 16 official visitors on campus this weekend. This is a bigger group, not just in terms of quantity, but quality. And leading off the group is one Chauncey Kennedy of Booker, Sarasota.
Chauncey Kennan. Killing it. The cigar's getting to you.
No, yeah, honestly, I was like, I didn't know whether to say Chuck or Chauncey, and I got so focused on that.
You said that in our group chat too, Kennedy. So this
Well,
isn't.
so you didn't correct me then.
Whoops.
This is why people like it when Chris is on the podcast better, I think. Chauncey Chuck Kennan, not Kennedy, is a 5-star prospect for 24/7 Sports. Composite 4-star, but a high-end 4-star prospect at that down in the Sarasota area. Someone who's taken a bevy of big-time official visits. And we weren't able to catch up with him this weekend. We did talk to him. I talked to him at the 7-on-7 camp he was attending, participating in earlier in the week. And the thing he said, Zach, that caught me going into the official visit when asked, what he was looking to accomplish, what he wanted to get out of it, what he was looking for, which I always find it to be kind of an interesting conversation because it's always going to be very different based on different recruit answers. He said he really was looking forward to the photo shoot, and my initial response like, oh boy, that's not what you want. But maybe with the gift of hindsight, if someone didn't have a whole lot of questions about the school they were going into for an official visit, that could be perceived as a good thing. So that brings us to a crystal ball, Zach. Let's talk about your prediction, your projection, where FSU stands for Chauncey Kennan right now.
Yeah, but one thing on the him wanting to do the photo shoot. Recruits can't do photo shoots anymore on unofficial visits. So like he's probably never gotten a photo shoot in an FSU uniform before. So that's part of why that's such a thing that guys look forward to. But your point also makes sense as to why he might have had all of his questions answered. And on that note, like I do think Florida State probably leads in this recruitment exiting this weekend. I feel really good about their standing with Chuck Kennan. He's obviously a top target for them at the corner position. 5-star, like you said, on 24/7 Sports. I went and saw him in the spring, and he's got a ton of options. His other top schools are Miami, Florida, Georgia, and LSU. So clearly a big time battle for one of the top guys in state at the corner positions. And I mean, he's the number 2 ranked corner in the entire country. So high level player. And yeah, I think FSU leads. I don't know when it comes to when he's going to decide. I don't know if he's going to stick with his timeline, which was July 6th, I believe, is when he planned to announce before the FSU OV. He still also has an OV set to LSU this upcoming weekend. So there's room for things to change, right? But the current pulse, exiting the weekend was that I felt very strongly about where FSU stood for Chuck Kennan. But obviously, we're going to continue to monitor whether that shifts at all towards any other school, because I'm sure a number of these other programs that are involved are going to try to make a big push leading up to whenever he decides. But yeah, I mean, FSU knocked it out of the park with him this weekend. Feeling great about their standing.
So he's taking official visits to Florida, Miami, Georgia. You mentioned the LSU one coming up. The significance, let's say FSU is able to secure this commitment. Let's say he announces and he's your recruit, and you're then able to have a decent season and retain him. Like, what would this mean? Like, how legitimate are these other recruitments that he's in right now? We've talked before. A lot of what we're set up for June was how do you do in these head-to-head battles to get up into a next tier of recruiting to elevate prep recruiting. So I guess what would this mean if this all does come to fruition, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, this would be one of the biggest recruiting wins of Mike Norvell's tenure at FSU to this point. We can go back. I mean, the statistic is there, right? He's signed 1 5-star recruit per 24/7 Sports, and Hakeem Williams, who's now at Colorado. If he lands and signs Chuck Kennan, obviously those are 2 different things, as Florida State fans know all too well. That would be the second 5-star recruit he's signed in his tenure at FSU, Mike Norvell. So a massive get if they're able to pull it off. And I mean, he's a guy that could have an early impact. I think he's a pretty impressive player, like on film. I like him. And then there's another visitor on campus, CJ Brunel. those are probably my two favorite corners in state this cycle. Saw both those guys in person this spring, and that it checks out. Like I both really high level prospects. So yeah, I mean, it would be a you know historic win when it comes to Mike Norvell's tenure at FSU if they're able to land Chuck Kinnon.
What were your thoughts? You got to listen to the CJ Bruno interview. I guess what stood out about that? He's still technically a Nebraska commit, but someone who I don't know seems to certainly be going through the process.
Yeah, he's very business, like when it comes to taking these OVs. He's not someone that's I think is going to be swayed into committing to a school before going through his entire process. And the process is this summer of visits. Like he's told everyone around him that he plans to take all of these visits to Nebraska, and then the three other schools involved, FSU, Florida, and Penn State, where he goes this upcoming weekend. And then he'll come to a final decision, in the next few weeks or months leading up to his senior year. So, yeah, I mean, the thought going into his OV stretch was that FSU and Florida were probably the two schools sitting in the best spot, with Florida probably having the edge. I think FSU has a real shot with CJ Bruno, but again, if you land a guy like Chuck Kinnon, like I don't know how much. Like we're gonna have to start talking about these recruitments in terms of allocation of resources in the salary cap era. If that stuff becomes enforceable, and I don't know if you can afford with what's already on the roster to land two top corner talents like that. But we'll see. I mean, it's certainly possible. I think CJ Bruno has a really good connection with FSU's coaching staff, specifically Evan Cooper and Pat Surtain, the two DB coaches. And yeah, I mean, I think that they have a real shot with him. But we'll revisit their chances after he's kind of done with this OV slate and he starts going into making that final decision.
That's been interesting, by the way, an element to see like when a DB recruit leaves, it's often Pat Surtain and Evan Cooper walking out with them. We've talked to multiple DBs that they worked with both of them simultaneously, like in like kind of seeing meeting rooms and I think even some of the VR stuff that they were doing. Sean Johnson particularly talked about like working with both of them in year one, and he'll primarily, he's an FSU commit. We project him as a safety. He's going to primarily be a safety. He said that was the one revelation I thought from the weekend from him, but said he also will work with Coach Surtain as well sometimes. So it's it's a new dynamic with the two on-field DB coaches specifically. Even though Adam Fuller previously DC worked as the safeties coach as well, two specific position coaches for the secondary. I just thought that was noteworthy as well. And you mentioned those two having a good relationship with him, those two working on a lot of the same recruits. Notable. All right, a second crystal ball, Zach. You put in a second one. You joined the party. You were a little late to it. You were kind of making fun of me for putting this in randomly about a week or so ago, but I guess it wasn't so random after all.
You're a messiah. Yeah, I mean the Noah Lavalley, the linebacker out of Marietta, Georgia, Walton High School. If the name sounds familiar, that's because he's the younger brother of Caleb Lavalley, who Florida State landed via the transfer portal out of North Carolina in December. He's a pretty good linebacker prospect, very productive. I think 100 plus tackles this past season. Someone that FSU it was first to offer years ago. I mean, this is before they even landed Caleb Lavalley out of the portal. They offered him. I say years ago, literally like I think in April of 2024, so just over a year ago. But yeah, I mean, a guy that they've liked for a long time. I mean, this started with Randy Shannon when he was linebackers coach, and it's carried over now with John Papuchis in that role. And yeah, I mean, he takes an OV to FSU, and the returns coming out of that trip are that FSU's in the leading position for him. Ole Miss is the other finalist for Noah Lavalley, and I think he likes that program a lot. But I do think that his connection with obviously his brother in the linebacker room, telling him, how it's been so far. And he's also connected with other guys in that room, like Juice Cryer. He spent a lot of time. I think that was his host on the visit. Actually, was Juice. So he spent a lot of time with him. Um, and yeah, I feel like Florida State's in a really good spot to, whenever he decides to eventually land Noah LaValle.
Good player. What's he ranked? He's 85 grade. I
Yeah,
think he's a better athlete than what Caleb was coming out of high school. Caleb was
I
maybe a
think
little
so
bit more
too.
of a physical linebacker, but yeah, this guy's got like legit 4.7 speed as a high school junior. Probably someone can project as like a 4.6 linebacker. So good athlete, I think. You see
Yeah,
on film here.
I agree. Yeah, Dana and I watched him back. We were evaling like a lot of their board, I think in like February, and we thought he's probably a little underranked. I mean, I can understand some of the limitations with size and stuff, but yeah, I thought like you compare him to his brother, and the athletic profile probably is considerably better. And obviously, plays in I think a pretty good classification in Georgia, and just some decent talent around him. So I mean, I'm high on him. I like if they do land him, I like the take, especially if FSU is able to hold on to their other linebacker commit, Karan Maycock, who I'm a big fan of, while also potentially landing one of these other high end linebacker targets thereafter, like a Rodney Colton or a DQ Forkpaw, or even the long shot like Xavier Griffin. I mean, that would really round out the class at the linebacker position really well.
All right. So sorry, I'm Xing out of this. One more crystal ball. I guess it was my crystal ball.
Yeah,
Put the weight into it that you will. I'm not the recruiting expert, but did hear that FSU feels pretty good about where it stands for composite 4-star Tico Crittenden Jr., aka goes by Taco. I don't know why Tico Taco. It's a little tic tac.
he
I don't
was
know.
wearing a taco hat when he
Yeah,
arrived.
he was. So it wasn't confusing at all in the group chat. Thank you, Christopher, for saying taco and confusing me at first. I guess I couldn't figure out who that was. Yeah, so I put in a crystal ball there. This is a guy with legit like SEC interest. I think he has an official visit to Tennessee at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is that still on? I believe. I forget.
Yeah, when he, at least in the interview he gave, it sounded like it was still on.
Yeah, so that's something to monitor. But I do think FSU exits that feeling pretty darn good about where it stands there for him. And if that holds, like if yeah, it is interesting putting in these crystal balls for multiple prospects, man, with like official visits still happening. A lot can happen in the negotiation game and whatnot. But like this is a guy that I think we're a little on the low side on as a company. I think we have an 89 grade. I've been pretty what's the word I'm looking for? I like critical, but like if I think we're high on someone, I haven't hesitated to put a lower grade on them when I've watched them. Um, and this I feel the opposite of. Like I feel like this is someone who has legit like NFL tools. I think it should be in the blue chip range at a minimum, where you're saying that that you start talking about potential like day 2, early day 3 type of upside. And you see how he moves at a legit 300 pounds, and the wingspan's really good. I think he has like 33-inch arms. There's a lot of stuff there that portends to high upside. The way he uses his hands, I think, is phenomenal for a high school player. There's still things he's got to clean up. Um, Technique wise, he still plays a little high. Some rigidity with the upper body. Uh, but man, the good is like really, really good. And that's someone that if you can go ahead and add him, we talked about last week with the name's escaping me right now. The
Whitley,
Whit,
Whitley
Whit,
could do
Whitley Cadu is more of a you know,
developmental.
very much so developmental, a lot of variance there. Yeah, this is someone with a higher floor with a lot of high upside as well. But this is kind of like when you talk about Whitley Cadu being, your number 3 defensive, lineman, interior defensive lineman type in the class. This is someone that needs to be your number 2 or so, I think, to make that all work. And that's what this could be for you. So that would be a big win for Florida State if you can get it done and finalized and then retained, into the season.
Yeah, for sure. I hadn't watched his film until just now, honestly, and he's super explosive, and obviously the measurables check out. Yeah, I mean, this would this is the type of prospect they need to be landing, right? The guys that maybe Georgia hosts for an OV, but we don't think maybe we'll push all out for, at least yet. Um, but I mean, you look at this film, and I mean, this is as good as any of maybe FSU's top tier or top ranked defensive tackle targets. I'm a fan. I mean, if they landed this guy, I would be pretty happy with FSU's D line haul so far, with obviously a few more top tier options still on the table.
Junior highlights 10 minutes long. It's a good sign generally. Yeah, I like him, and that would be a nice win for Florida State. A few other prospects who we maybe haven't quite had the fortitude built up yet to put in a crystal ball for, but at least kind of.
Yeah. I said, but we feel good about them.
Yeah, guys who maybe we would consider in the future. I think there's a couple. There's another defensive lineman who was here this weekend. Different build, different type of player, not quite as regional as Crittenden, who's from Georgia. This is someone who's been kind of all over the place. Do you want to get into that one, Zach?
Yeah, Tank Carrington. James is
not to be confused with Tank Carradine, the former FSU defensive lineman.
Yeah, he's we have him listed 6'2", 257 pounds, an 89 grade per 247 Sports, and a guy that was a very highly ranked prospect early on in his process, but has fallen off a little bit, down to a 3-star grade. He's been all over, like you said. He was at Rabun Gap in Georgia, Bishop Gorman, which I think that's Vegas, right?
That's Vegas. That's a power. At least historically, it's been a powerhouse.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. St. Francis is in the DMV is a power. Now he's at Crane Lutheran in Irvine, California. So 4 high schools in 4 years. It sounds like. So yeah, I mean that's definitely something to note. But yeah, FSU hosts him for an OV this weekend. It kind of came out of nowhere. FSU had offered him a long time ago, but he wasn't really considered like a top target or someone that they were actively pursuing until recently. I had kind of heard his name come up in a conversation a while ago. We continued to check on it. He finally let us know that he's going to take an OV, takes it, and it sounds like FSU's in a really good spot for him coming out of the OV. I think Florida State's probably in the lead. He told us that Nebraska is also on his OV slate for this upcoming weekend. That'll be something to monitor on whether he takes that visit or not. If not, you got to, obviously love FSU's chances to potentially land him. But if he does follow through with that trip, obviously going to be something to monitor. But yeah, feeling good about FSU's chances with James Tank Carrington.
We'll get into it more if FSU does end up getting a commitment from him, but I do find his frame and like this generally this type of like build for a defensive lineman intriguing. Obviously the optimal is like being 6'5" and 245 pounds with room to get up to the 265s and long arms and stuff. But to me, like the next wave, and you can go either really like lengthy and skinny, you can go with more kind of sawed off. But if you're going to go sawed off with that next tier of like build, you want someone. I'm intrigued by someone with that shorter frame or shorter, more stout frame, but crazy long arms. Like I think that's an interesting combination because you get the leverage effects of being a quote unquote smaller player. I think he's at 6'2", 245 or so right now. But then you get really long arms, and you could see like the build, the actual like frame width of the shoulders, and then just the arm length and size. It's interesting. Reminds me, was it a kid from Troy who I was really infatuated with a few years ago?
Devon Solomon.
That's it. Yeah. And he's from Tallahassee. He was somebody I hoped FSU went after in the portal, but they remember somebody at staff was like, he's just too short for us. But he ended up being like a 5th-round pick for the Bills this past year. Had 3 sacks as a rookie. Like that's a way I think you can find some like value, in the margins there. And so maybe that's kind of what FSU is doing here. You mentioned Zach, it's a player who's descended a little bit from a ranking standpoint. I just don't think he's grown the way people expect, but I still think the shoulder frame, the bulk, the length like still plays. So depending on what the price is, and someone who I see some level of intriguing ad for if you go ahead and get him. Who else? Oh, how about the tight end Xavier Tiller from Northwest Georgia? I forget the exact area. Where is he at? I'm pulling it up here. Fairburn, Georgia. So that's somewhere Langston Hughes High. He was hanging out with Shamar No, who also played high school ball, similar area in Northwest Georgia there. And someone who FSU needs after a tight end development this week, Zach. Maybe we get into that. But he left the interview just speaking pretty glowingly about the visit. Talked like someone who seemed like they wanted to commit soon.
Said he was going to shock the world.
Well, that I don't know if I believe in, but I try to see if I can find the actual quote from him here because I thought that was a little bit. He said he was really, really high on FSU, which whatever. But the way he said it, it was when he was asked, "What?"
He said, "You'll see." Right?
That's it. So where's FSU after he said they stand really high, really high. You'll see, really high. Whatever. It's a kid coming off an official visit, but I think he's only taken 3 total, right? Auburn, Alabama, Florida State. Auburn's probably the school there that you're competing with, so probably a decent shot there. Now you just got to see if you can kind of hold on. But someone I think FSU leads for coming out of the official visit.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the concern is that obviously he's much closer to Auburn. I think he's like an hour and a half away where he, lives. And I'm sure they're going to make it tough for FSU to hold on to that lead. But I do agree with you. I think FSU probably holds that top spot exiting this visit. The good news is that he doesn't have any more visits scheduled. He's going into this, decision-making mode. But, in this NIL era, it's always something to monitor. I've heard that FSU is going to be competitive in this recruitment, especially, you mentioned before the development of Isaac Jensen. He's a 3-star tight end, but someone that FSU really valued at that position. Actually attended Chase Lofton's high school in Nebraska.
They're going to say Chase Lofton High, like they named it after him already.
I mean, pretty much. He tore it up there, but yeah, I mean, it's tight end you. I mean, you're churning out high level tight ends every year, it seems like. But yeah, he committed to Missouri and canceled his FSU OB. So I mean, he was one of the guys they valued the most at that position this cycle. And Xavier Tiller is not far behind him, or maybe even on that same tier. I mean, he's much more highly ranked. Xavier is than Isaac Jensen. But yeah, he's a guy that Xavier Tiller's a guy they absolutely want to add, and we'll monitor. It sounds like a decision could come in the next week or two. So we should get some more clarity on this recruitment here pretty soon.
He looks great, by the way. Like that's he's only 215 pounds, but wingspan, just broad shoulders. Shook his hands; they were massive. For a tight end, that's probably noteworthy. So yeah, guy that has a lot of physical tools. Is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, he moves really well if you watch him on film, and a guy that they evaluated in the spring and really, really liked. So we'll keep an eye on whether the pulse changes there, and whether one of these Alabama schools is able to kind of challenge FSU's momentum in his recruitment.
That would be another one when you talk about the head-to-heads you need to win. Beating Auburn, Auburn's in that tier right above you. In terms of blue chip recruits that they're able to go ahead and get, and this is someone you want. So just another key battle that's kind of shaping up here down the stretch of this pivotal time of the year in terms of getting your class together. Let's talk real quick, Zach, about 3 other visitors commitments. There are 4 technically, but 3 who are a little bit more up in the air for Florida State and kind of where things stand for them. There's at least one key development there that in regards to a player shutting things down, but I'll let you take it and just kind of go over the 3 players there.
Yeah, wide receiver commit Darion Williams returned to campus. He's been committed for over a year. There was a pretty significant scare there with Florida making a big move for him in the last few months. I mean, I went by his school, and the vibe I got, and I went by his school in the spring, and the vibe I got was that UF was going to flip him. But it sounded like after UF landed, an FSU receiver target, Justin Williams, who plays his high school football in Gainesville, sounded like they maybe cooled a little bit on Darion Williams, and in addition to that, FSU gets him back on campus, is able to sell him on his role in the offense, and yeah, he leaves the visit shutting down his recruitment and says he's going to sign with Florida State and enroll in January. So positive development there. Someone that they've been invested in for a long time. I'm honestly interested in Darion Williams more as a cornerback. I think he's a really good corner. I do like his potential role as kind of that, I forget the word
The
he
two
used.
wide receiver, the off ball or
Yeah,
whatever.
but he used like he the guy that they do the jet stuff, the reverse, the
They
screen.
just took. I
Like
mean, I think they just took someone else in Brandon Bennett, who we talked about. I got the name correct, right? When every time I just say a name and I haven't looked at it right before, I freak out now. Chauncey Kennedy being an example of that. Brandon Bennett, we talked about him last Monday as someone who FSU was trending for. He did commit. It's like Zach knows what he's talking about sometimes. Anywho, that's someone who fits that same kind of two wide receiver role. Different, slightly type of players, and they're both fast. Bennett's more of a vertical explosive speed guy. And I think that there's a little bit more like twitch here for
agree.
Darion Williams. More like a kind of I'm trying to think of the right way, like a jitterbug type of kind of moving around quickly, shifty, that type of stuff. But both fast guys, but to your point, Zach, that shiftiness might portend better to DB play potentially. So point being is you have two guys who are probably fit in a similar type of. Why are you smiling?
No, I was just gonna say I really like this. I really like his personality. In
Yes. Oh,
the
do
interview.
you want to get into some of the things he talked about on the
Yeah,
on record?
someone asked him whether uh, he was like recruiting for FSU while on campus, and he goes, "I might have just threatened some recruits that were upstairs." The quarterback, I think he's talking about the 2027 quarterback Trent Seaborn, who was on campus yesterday. He goes, "I told him if you don't come here, next time I see him, I'm going to give him the flying elbow. Hopefully, he decides to come here. I told other recruits I'm going to give them the flying elbow too."
I never interviewed him before, and he started. That was really early on in the interview process. I did not know how to take it at
Yeah.
first,
No,
and then kind of figure out the
he's
vibe.
funny. He's funny. Yeah, I like him, and I think FSU's happy to keep him in the fold. A lot of moving pieces in their wide receiver recruiting. Landing Brandon Bennett, obviously locking down the commitment of Darion Williams, and they still have another commit in Ephraim White, but I think that one's a little bit up in the air. With Notre Dame and NC State both in play.
And then
Um,
there were two others: Tadarius Hughes, Darrell Bell, both South Florida guys, both technically listed as safeties for us.
Yeah, I think Darrell Bell is going to be recruited to play that rover role. I really like Darrell Bell. I hope they hold on to him. Auburn's the other threat for him as well. Feel good. I need to do some more digging, honestly, on that recruitment here today. But I do feel good about FSU's chances of holding on to him as of right now. Um, yeah, I really like him as a player and just the mental makeup, and I think I've talked about that before on here. But yeah, and then Tadarius Hughes, different kind of safety prospect, much longer, more rangy, really long arms, and a guy that FSU was early on. He committed last year. Darabell, by the way, has been committed since October of 2023, so he's been committed for a long time. And then Tadarius Hughes committed to them last summer, and Miami made a brief play at him, but it's now mainly Syracuse that's the threat for Tadarius Hughes. I forget if he said if he's still going on his OV to Syracuse this upcoming weekend, but that's obviously something to watch because they are making a strong effort to try and flip him from FSU. He'd fit in one of the more traditional safety roles. As more of a traditional safety body and just play style. So yeah, I think he's a pretty good prospect and someone I think they want to keep in the class. But interested to see what kind of what's going on there with Syracuse. I also need to make sure if he's still taking that visit or not.
All right, let's transition to what's happening today and will be happening in the next few days, and that's the next wave of official visits. They are midweek officials. Historically, for Florida State, have not been super beneficial. Now this is a different type of recruiting calendars, unlimited official visits for both parties, school and prospects. So what was true before may not be true now. And I will say that what Florida State does have on deck is 7 official visits and a handful of like really high end ones too. So we'll see like if this strategy and being able to kind of squeeze it in between other weekend official visits, what that ends up leading to. But it is a good group that has arrived. Now, first things first, if you're checking out Knowles247.com, you already know the value of having Chris Snee there and doing his accounting brain, doing accounting things. All 7 have arrived. All right, so everyone who was expected in has made it in. I think that's the first thing. So there was some, with guys coming off of weekend official visits, negotiation season, you always kind of wonder who's going to show up. Secondly, Chris does a nice job painting the picture of who's with the players, parents, whatnot. Like with Calvin Russell, has a big group with them. He has a 5-star receiver down in Miami. He's just coming off a Miami official visit. It's going to be a big time recruitment. The fact that he's here with his family means that there's at least, with them just coming off of another official visit, paint the picture, if you will, like there's interest, right? And so that's, you got him in the door, and now you go. But the big name, I think, Zach, and you can talk about all of them if you want, just a few of them. But I think the name, because it's at the most important position in football. It's when we've talked about Florida State's recruiting board. This has kind of been there, after the first wave of offers after Brady Schmegel. I was half-hearted. Decommitted. This was probably the 4th guy after the 3 offers that they were interested in. They've turned up the heat on him recently, and that's Oklahoma quarterback commit Jaden O'Neal. Phew, sorry I rambled.
You're good. Set the stage well.
Thank you.
Jaden O'Neal is FSU's lone official visitor at the quarterback position this summer. They were obviously set to get Keyshawn Henderson in. He canceled his OV, and then more recently, Landon Duckworth canceled his official visit, which was set for this past weekend. Jaden O'Neal comes in midweek. My prediction is that they're going to end up flipping him from Oklahoma. I don't envision him.
Show crystal ball.
Maybe. Let me talk through it real quick. But yeah, he, I think, was like on campus at Oklahoma this past weekend, and having some serious conversations with that staff. And yeah, I just think that this is how this recruitment is going to unfold. Obviously, he still has to decommit or flip, and that step needs to be taken. But he's FSU's guy at the quarterback position now, after the developments of the other 2 guys that were set to come in. So yeah, I think they're going to make a strong effort to get him locked in. They want to have a quarterback committed by the end of the summer so they can continue to build this class. The sooner the better, honestly, because when you're trying to attract skill talent or any guys at any position, you want to have that leader, you want to have that main voice in the class, and then that usually comes from the quarterback position. So yeah, big visit here with Jaden O'Neal. He's definitely there are far more talented players on campus. I shouldn't say far more. There are more talented, highly ranked players on campus this week for the midweek OBs, but he's the most important in my opinion because of the position he plays and the fact that FSU doesn't really have any other blue chip options on the table right now.
I don't know. Buyer Sinone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
Jaden O'Neal's fit in the Gus Malzahn offense.
Also, no. I don't think he's an ideal fit. Jaden O'Neal's a talented quarterback. He has a huge arm. We saw that on firsthand last summer when he camped at FSU at their league camp. Chris and I, the FSU coaching staff, all came away with that impression that he might have had the best day out there. And there were, 5-star quarterback Dia Bell was there, who's committed to Texas. Brady Smeagol was there. There we go. You got it. You
had to warm up a little bit. I've been told it's a little loud for people on the car speakers.
Okay. Yeah, probably scaring the kids. Faison Brandon, he's committed to Tennessee. I think Jaden O'Neal had the best day out of all of them at that camp. Commits to Oklahoma soon after. but FSU continues to recruit him. I just, yeah, I mean, I can Sonone his fit while also believing that Gus Malzahn thinks he can make it work, right?
Well, yeah,
They
those
wouldn't,
those are two different. That's your belief in
yeah,
something, and
yeah,
the
but
offense
I
are
think
two
that,
different things.
you know, Gus Malzahn knows far more about his offense and what will work in it than I will.
Yeah,
Um, so
I don't think that's a qualifier. Like, I know why you're doing it.
I understand, like, I understand what you're saying, but
I understand what you're saying.
I'm more so like, I think that they're not operating from a position of power, and maybe, you know, I know a lot of the argument on our board is, hey, well, you know, don't go and pay for a quarterback of this, you know, magnitude, of this status. Go find a more underrated guy who fits the system better, and you know, spend less money on that position. And honestly, like, I agree with that. Um, but there's, you know, a difference between like what, you know, we might all think and what's actually happening. And, you know, I think it's important to make that distinction, because you know, as much as, you know, we ideally want, you know, a guy that you know, fits the Mazan scheme. Like, I do think that he believes that Jaden O'Neal can, you know, his skill set can fit in his offense and they can make it work. And he's made that pitch multiple times this offseason to other quarterbacks. Like I mentioned before, that 27 kid, Trent Seaborn, I think Chris has mentioned this several times on the pod about Malzahn selling him on, you know, the fact that his quarterback's not just made for, you know, or his offense is not just made for quarterbacks with, you know, that dual threat ability,
He's
which
had
we've been,
productive offenses without elite athletes at quarterback. I
yeah.
think the argument is that it's been at its best when there's been elite
Yeah,
point
and I
guards.
think that's 100% fair and probably true. So yeah, I mean,
And Jaden O'Neal's not a poor athlete, but he's also like his athleticism is in the construct of throw to or run to throw type of deal, right? Like there's, you know, decent, like the pocket movement stuff. I actually think is pretty good. I think that's a plus trait, but the improv, the ability to, you know, be explosive as a runner, not quite as evident on film, and so that's, you know, the nuance there.
yeah, I agree. Um, so I mean, yeah, I mean, I
But
think
as a
that
guy with a big arm and high upside, so like, you know,
yeah,
I'm not against if this is what you land on. I don't.
I think the financial piece is the most important.
Well, yeah, and I can't imagine it's going to be inexpensive. Now, I will say one thing about the Jaden O'Neal, like as we look at his recruitment, Oklahoma's been fine, kind of pushing him out. If that's ultimately what happens, they don't. I'll put it this way: that they're not settled with him, right? They've made it very clear in their pursuit of Bo Bentley, like that they are looking to upgrade. Now they
Yeah,
have a
I
new
think that's
offensive.
the Ben Arbuckle coming in as their
Yeah,
OC, like that.
we had John Mateer, or not? Is it John Mateer?
Yeah, John Mateer. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's more the caliber of athlete I think that they want, you know, in that offense. That's what Bo Bentley is.
yeah,
But the only other school really in it right now for Jaden O'Neal, to our understanding, is Arizona, where he took a visit to.
but I'm pretty sure that was kind of like at least my understanding is that it's a courtesy visit, because I think his like quarterback coach is there or something along those lines.
Yeah, FSU trending to have two Oklahoma decommits at quarterback and back-to-back classes is odd. It just
Yeah,
it is, but you know, it's a position that feels as much crapshooty as any position that there is currently, from the high school to the high school to the college eval process, and that's not just us as a network or, you know, recruiting and, you know, recruiting coverage industry as a whole. That's college coaches as well miss on this stuff all the time too at a pretty high rate. So we can gas bag and have different theories as to what the fit is and isn't. Ultimately, it's a guy with a big arm, and you kind of roll the dice and you see what you get for a couple of years. Like I don't think that's a bad practice by any stretch.
yeah. Plus, I mean, Gus Malzahn's offense needs to work this year for Jaden O'Neal to
Yeah.
be in the plans.
For everything that we're talking about,
Yeah,
which is kind of
exactly.
this existential crisis, like for anything that we're talking about, it all kind of has to work, whether it's Tony White and going back to Zack Arnett, and you can have all these grand plans, but it all has to work
Yeah,
now for it to all work later too.
for sure. Yeah, and there's a few other guys that are on campus right now that are very high level. I mean, Derek Cooper is a borderline 5-star prospect out of South Florida, out of Chaminade. We love Chaminade, don't we? Yeah, he's very very talented. Could be a blue chip player at running back or DB. He's being recruited as a running back primarily. FSU loves him. Has been recruiting him forever. Really tough recruitment to win. Wouldn't expect FSU to win that one. Calvin Russell, like you mentioned, James Johnson, I think is the top defensive lineman in the state of Florida, in my opinion. I mean, watch the film; he's unbelievable.
He was
Um,
one from Southwest Florida, and he's moved, but he was
yeah,
from
he's at
yeah,
Northwestern.
yeah.
Yeah, he's really big time player. But like I said before, I mean, he's going to be one of the most costly recruitments in the entire 26 cycle, I'd assume, just because of the position he plays, where he's from, and just the schools that are involved. I mean, he took OBs to Miami, Florida, Georgia, and I think maybe Texas. So he's got a ton of big time spenders and programs involved in trying to land him. He's coming off of Miami OB, and he's now at FSU, and actually goes to the same high school as Calvin Russell at Miami Northwestern. So,
Okay.
both very high level players who, I mean, that's kind of the group that you shoot your shot for, right? You try to see if you can, maybe land one of those very high end prospects. I mean, these are some of the most highly ranked and highly talented players visiting FSU all summer, just to put it in perspective. So yeah, and there's a few more attainable options on campus right now. Madden Williams is committed to Texas A&M, a 4-star wide receiver that Dane and I really like after watching him on film. Keyshawn Eliezer is a 6'5" edge rusher out of Southeast Raleigh High School in North Carolina, and then
How do you
Control
pronounce it? Raleigh?
Raleigh.
I mean, I'd say Raleigh. My
Yeah, I think you're
pronunciation
right.
has not been stellar today, so I could
And
be.
then Collins Hill, edge rusher, Catrell Webb, is also on campus, and he's a guy that I know. Knowles 24/7 expert, CC Daddy. I don't know if we can call him that, but yeah, he's very high.
We not call him a CC Daddy or an expert?
Or Knowles 24/7.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, he's comped, so he's like a pseudo staff guy.
Yeah,
He's a hat tip and a thank you for your service type
he
of
does
guy.
good
He
work.
does a really good job. I'm happy that he's around.
I also reported today that
Yes, an expert.
Brody Jennings, the 4-star cornerback out of Jacksonville Mandarin, is going to be on campus. His visit starts tomorrow on Tuesday. He's the son of Bradley Jennings, who sadly passed away in the last few weeks unexpectedly. So that was super upsetting. But FSU is going to try and land Brody, the youngest of Bradley's 3 sons. And he's currently committed to Michigan, but he's a really high level player who took OBs to Florida, Miami, and Auburn before seeing FSU this week.
All right, so I've got as we wrap this up and try to put a bow on the podcast, and really as we kind of end into the final stretch here of June, a topic that I want to get into, Zach, and you've touched on this with the NIL aspect, negotiations. It's been a common talking point for us on this podcast, especially the House settlement going through on the message board. And that is kind of FSU's view of what's going to happen next. Now that the House settlement is in, now that there is this potential hard cap on college football and just college athletics in general, $20.5 million. And FSU will spend TV revenue, use its TV revenue to kind of fund that. And there's more dynamics at play that I probably am not well equipped to get into the weeds on right off the top of my head, but that's the general idea of it. And there's an NIL enforcement group. We've talked about this with Deloitte, NIL Go. They've already started the process of basically it's a clearinghouse. It's if you get a deal, you have to say it's not like value, but fair value, which is fairly broad. in term, but it does sound like there's already been some deals rejected, according to Michael Alfred at a recent board of trustees meeting. I don't know why my brain said booster twice after I went to correct it the first time and I had BOT in mind. But anyways, Michael Alfred talked about that. I'm not clear if it was Florida State deals or just deals in general that have been nixed. But a big talking point for us and our belief is that, and then the talking point of Michael Alford, and these two kind of converge a little bit, is will FSU be willing to go circumvent the cap? And obviously you have NIL opportunities you'll be able to provide within the guardrails that are being outlined through Deloitte, and that's like just real, like what NIL was supposed to be. Hey, you go to a Ford dealership and you get $500 for this commercial or whatever. There's all sorts of variables to this that are interesting to me, like using an NFL algorithm for NIL deals is interesting because the value of players isn't based on like what they're getting at different sponsorship, lower levels local sponsorships. Like they get all their value, majority of it, I should say, through contracts, and that's not the case for these players. Like yes, they're going to be compensated directly through the schools now moving forward in that $20.5 million piece of the pie. But still, I think you can make the argument whether that's there's still a cap to them and they're not employees. So this is where it's all going to go, is lawsuits and stuff. Long story short, what I'm getting to, Zach, here, and what I'm interested to see is FSU's talked about this even recently with Michael Alfred saying that some of their coaches in the athletic program in general, didn't specify the sport, are saying, well, some schools are already going well and above it. We're going to know pretty soon, I think, pretty quickly, based on the efforts that FSU has recruiting, securing commitments with football specifically, coming off of a 2-win season, if you're willing to play ball or not, to what other schools are doing around the country. If you're playing by the rules and very strictly within the lines, I think we'll have a pretty good idea of that. And if you're willing to paint outside the lines, color outside the lines, I think we'll have a good idea of that as well. And that's something I'm really interested to see how the next month plays out, because I think we'll have a pretty good indication of what they're doing. That's my theory.
Yeah, I mean, if there's still that level of disparity in the sport, with these deals, I mean, like does the recruiting aspect, does that play into this? I mean, I know these schools have to plan to offer contracts that fall under fair market value or whatever. But I wonder if schools are going to try to get away with it's already been reported that schools are paying kids in high school, advanced money to essentially, circumvent the cap. Yeah, I mean that there's so many factors at play, but yeah, you're right. I mean, if we're seeing all these top kids go where, they usually go, and we're hearing about, wildly, crazy numbers at all these positions. I mean, we've heard linebackers that are, wanting like 500,000 plus, which is just, I mean, if you think about roster value and how much you're allocating towards that position, like that's a crazy mark if you're going to be falling under this cap. So are these numbers going to come down to earth, or are we going to see this, stay the same or get crazier? I mean,
You're talking about the more broader level of it, Zach.
Yeah. I'm just giving an example of just like how crazy it's gotten. I mean, like we talk about the value of different positions, and like using linebackers as an example. Like I don't think it's like, if you're looking at like how you're constructing your roster, like I don't think the linebacker position is getting that much allocation of resources under what $15 or $20 million cap. It's only going to be a couple $1 million. So yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see how these recruitments unfold and what we can gather from the NIL portion of it, and how that if the house stuff has impacted it at all, this early on after its inception.
Okay, we will see. There's going to be ample evidence, both micro level, and then just across college football to see who's doing what. I think we'll get a pretty good clear of it, seeing how recruiting kind of goes here in the coming weeks. So stay tuned, and then also stay tuned at Knowles247.com as we have updates throughout this week of the official visitors currently coming to campus, and then the one, I guess they've already arrived, and then the ones coming up at the end of the week as well. For the final weekend visit slate before things kind of shut down a little bit. Do we have anything there real quick that we want to preview, Zach, for that last weekend?
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty I got to pull it up because I mean there's just so many prospects.
There's 14 coming. I mean the big name there is Xavier Griffin, and whether you're able to get that to show up, him to show up and get that, and then Isaiah Williams, the Ole Miss linebacker commit, former Florida linebacker commit, former Florida State linebacker commit,
former Syracuse linebacker commit, former Louisville linebacker commit.
Freaky athlete, but obviously some stuff there. And then
I mean, it tells you something that schools are still willing to, heavily
sure.
recruit him, considering how his recruitment's unfolded to this point. He was at UF this past weekend. You got to see if he's still on the schedule for FSU.
Let's see, Cameron Wilson, someone who we made a big deal of when he picked Syracuse over Florida State. You're getting the last official visit here, and we'll see if you go ahead and if you still want him, if you can turn the tide there. Fair to evaluate things in real time, even more fair to evaluate the entire scope of it as well. So we will see. Amari Thomas is a name real quick, Zach, I think is worth talking about. I got to see him this week at a 7-on-7. Honestly, I know Dana's spoken highly of him before, and just the physical build, and not just the highlight films, but just like how he's built, muscle structure, all the things that you can kind of point to and saying like this is what he could develop into. I thought that was super impressive, and he was at the 7-on-7, and his field was adjacent to Jay Lamar's, the South Georgia running back from Colquitt County. FSU had him on an official visit last weekend. And I thought Amari Thomas looked drastically better than Jay Lamar did. And Jay Lamar didn't look bad, but just the way Amari Thomas moved, the physical build, the competitiveness. They had him at wide receiver, and he was going up competing for stuff and making plays. And there was something there that I think kind of pushes past the 3-star grade that we have on him. But he had South Carolina gloves on, and I think FSU is concerned about South Carolina there with finances and just the way they're recruiting him. And this is a guy who's really local. I mean, he's from Blountstown, which is about an hour west down the Panhandle. So yeah, you're rolling your eyes. It's a development, and we'll see if Florida State can.
I mean, they're not going to get any of these other top line or running back targets. I don't think they're going to land Jay Lamar. They missed on Carson Baker. He went to Florida, and then Derek Cooper is just too much of a long shot, in my opinion. You got to land Amari Thomas. You cannot let him flip to South Carolina. I mean, you talk about battles they need to win. I mean, that's a battle you need to win, right? The South Carolina's in the tier below FSU in that article series you did.
Or the same tier, but FSU's kind of in the weird.
But they're like falling into that tier, and they want to.
Yes, FSU's falling, where South Carolina.
If you don't want to fall in that tier, you got to beat South Carolina. So, I mean, he's a local running back prospect. He's your lone commit at the position. You don't feel great about your position or your standing with any other.
You hit on the eval with him, I think.
Yeah,
too.
for sure.
So, yeah,
you landed an early commitment from him.
That's the kind of stuff Mike Norvell talked about. He's like, they think they are strong at eval, even if last season's evals and they learned lessons in the transfer portal worked out extremely poorly for them. It's something that he thinks that they're still really good at. And he said when you ask him in the spring, evaluation is the most critical piece of football. It's one of the biggest components of what we do. What we have to do is a better job of closing. Again, if someone flips in June, it doesn't mean you can't sign them in December, but it becomes harder to do. It's going to become more expensive to do, given I'm with you. I don't want to be an alarmist, but it is, you should be winning. You should be winning. I don't know if I'm going to say need, but you should be winning this. You're saying need, you can't lose it.
I'm just saying need because of the scope of their running back recruiting. I do think he's a need to land or to, to retain because of, like I don't see a path to them landing any of these other top running back targets. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just how I feel.
As an aside, they do really like Usman Kroma a lot. He's on campus now. Who's his high school teammate that visited this weekend? The corner.
Lasiah Jackson.
And he would say that he heard Usman Kroma had gone off the last week or so at a practice, and I heard similarly as well. Maybe I'll throw that to the board, but they're very excited about him. So if you don't hit a running back in this class, not the end of the world, but you've gone up to this point where you've hit the eval. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about it. A guy who's committed currently.
You're spending
anyway. It just more so. We're talking about process. If he comes and says after his official visit this weekend, hey, I'm shutting things down. I'm Florida State. This is where I want to be. And then he doesn't take any visits during the season and he signs with you. We're saying that that's a really good sign because we think he's going to push past what his ranking is. And that's a big win for you. Conversely, if you don't get him, that's going to be disappointing. It's not something just to shrug off. And I think that's more, I'm just trying to outline our thoughts on the process as it's occurring in real time.
Yeah.
Shake your head. That's good for audio.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah, just say that. And then
I agree.
Thank you. All right. Zach agrees. For Zach Blostein, I'm Brendan Sinone. This has been another episode of Noles 24/7's On the Bench. Check us out next week. We will be doing a final official visit recap of June. Hopefully there's some more news, some traction, some crystal balls, some clarity, all that good stuff. Check out Noles 24/7 between now and then if you're looking for FSU news, especially the most up-to-date, accurate recruiting information out there. We'll talk to you later.